Tonight, I'm really, really excited. We don't get enough men of such stature in our homes very often, nor do we be live either. So I have the great opportunity to be able to have John McManus with us tonight. He's now President Emeritus of the John Birch Society. And I would apparently say, since Robert Welch, there are very few people that know more about the John Birch Society than he does. And I always the John Birch Society. It's how they parallel with in history with current events today, so that people can see. Really, I like to tell people, John, that we've really 60 years, and I'm personally pretty proud of it. So, and I try to encourage others to be able to look truth when it comes to history elements that you can really look no further than the John Birch Society. Am I right?
Correct.
Well, so please, if you would, before we get started, tell us about John. Tell us where you came from, how you grew up, where you live, if you want to, anything personal you want to throw out at us, and how you got involved in the John Birch Society.
I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, small community back east. I went to Holy Cross College, graduated, went into the Marine Corps for 3 years, came out of that in 1960, and I started looking into conservative thinking. I became a big fan of William Buckley, and I later found out that he was deceiving everybody. I've written a book on that subject, and it caused quite a stir. Um, One of the nicest things that happened regarding that book is my friendship developed with Joe Sobran, who worked for Buckley for 21 years and was summarily put out on the street. So I started going to John Birch meetings in 61, 62, and I began to read some of the books that were available. And I eventually said to myself, these people are right. I got to do something. So I joined the society in 1964, and they asked me to join the staff in 1966 as a coordinator. I covered 5 New England states, which is probably, you could fit all of them in Idaho. I
Probably.
don't, probably. And 2 years of that. And then they asked me to take a staff job in the office at the headquarters, which then was in Belmont, Massachusetts, where Robert Welch lived. So I did that and took on several different spots, was named Director of Public Relations in 1973 and President in 1971. So 1991, excuse me. Uh, so it's been quite a ride. I've been in all 50 states giving speeches and radio interviews and whatever, and never looked back. I have absolutely no regrets, and I wish I were still younger and I could still do it. But I can do it now on Zoom, so that's good.
Well, you were out in Idaho Falls not too long ago, and you see everything seemed like it was working just fine to me. So we were definitely glad to have you. So we had Robert Welch had this. He had this interesting background. Mine, of course, was not business background. Mine was nothing like his. So I mean, what kind of a business background did you come from, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I took a job as a electronics engineer, manufacturing semiconductor devices. And about the time that I left that in 1966, we were developing the first of the silicon chips. And I always think if I had stayed in that program, I might be wealthy, but uh, I wouldn't be able to sleep with myself for letting a chance to help the John Birch Society get the truth out. So I have no regrets about that. But that was my education. I majored in physics in college, and it didn't help me at all in the Marine Corps.
Well, I don't. For those that don't know, and maybe there are, everybody does know that's watching, but the voice that I've heard, I hear it over and over again in my mind. I've listened to the overview of America even before I even knew that who the John Birch Society was, and here I am faced with the man with the voice. So this is really I remember when I got started in the John Birch Society as a member. Um, it was really interesting to be able to see the kind of information that was there. And then when I was looked at for a possible hire, it was really quite incredible for me because I couldn't, out of all of the years of rabble rousing activism I did in Idaho, it was great to be recognized for my efforts. But what was even better than that is now I can legitimately say, if I died tomorrow, that I was a legitimate part of history. Not too many people get the ability to rub shoulders with guys like you, and of course I don't get to do that with Robert Welch, but with Art Thompson and a lot of those guys, and being part of spreading the truth, which is really amazing for me. But so as we go into this, so I'm, sometimes as coordinators we have members that will jump on for a year and then they might jump off for a year, and it seems to me that there was, and not that there are true blue hardcore, long-term supporters and things now, but it seemed like there was something a little bit more, I don't know, iconic, if you will, maybe the World War II generation or something like that, that probably produced some of the most active activists I think I've ever seen. Was there so what about the John Birch Society, as you were going through it and all of that, what really kept you on as a member? So you told me that it's a lot of good information, it was a good organization, but there had to have been more than that for you, right?
Well, that's true. You got to remember back in the early 1960s, communism was a big threat, and it was pretty much known by people who took some time to look into the situation that there were a lot of communists in government, and nobody was doing anything about it. In fact, the only man who tried to do something about it got smeared and eventually died. I'm talking of Joe McCarthy. Uh, Joe McCarthy was absolutely right from day one. He was a careful guy. He never spoke in superlatives that couldn't be backed up, and a very admirable individual. But he got destroyed by a media. So I kept saying to myself, "There's something wrong here, even more than just communism." So in 1966, Robert Welch wrote a speech and published it in the American Opinion magazine, which is the forerunner of the New American. And in that, there was one sentence that I've considered to be as important in my life as almost all of the scriptural sentences and sayings that I can think of. He said, "But the communist movement is only a part of a larger conspiracy." When I read that, I went, I hit myself in the forehead and I said, "That's it. That's it." So the John Birch Society shifted from just being anti-communist to being anti a worldwide conspiracy that had a grip on our government and our media and other aspects of American life. That made the John Birch Society very, very controversial. And but the society had already survived a tremendous amount of smear and attacks. We were labeled every nasty thing you could possibly imagine. We were racists, we were anti-Semites, we were crackpots, we were kooks, we were dangerous, we were everything, and we survived. And what's interesting about that is the more we were attacked, the more members who joined. And so finally, the movers and shakers on the wrong side of this whole situation decided it's better to just ignore them, and maybe we can starve them out and have their existence go away. So we just kept plugging away at the United Nations, at the civil rights movement back then, which was clearly directed by the communists. And I got a couple of things out of my files here I can show you. Here are two booklets that were published by communists and distributed by the John Birch Society. The first one is called American Negro Problems, and that one came out in 1928, and it was written by a man named John Pepper, whose real name was Joseph Pogany, a Hungarian communist who had been brought to America to help organize the civil rights movement. So that book, and then this one here, It's called the Negroes in a Soviet America. What they intended to do was, of course, to make it, the United States a Soviet, much the same as they had done to Czechoslovakia and Hungary and so many other countries in Eastern Europe.
So who was the author of that one?
The author of that one was two communists named James Ford and James Allen.
Okay.
And they made no bones about the fact that they were communists, and they spread this information throughout the black portions of our country, especially. They targeted the Southeast, and where a lot of the states had a high population of black people. There's a point in this that I want to make, and it's the last sentence in a, 65-page book. No, 45 pages. The last sentence says, urges the blacks who read this literature, join the Communist Party, help create the powerful, great vanguard, which is leading the masses towards socialism. Not towards communism, towards socialism.
Yeah.
See, over the years, I've tried to get a lot of people to realize that the goal is socialism. The USSR stood for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Now, why are the communists interested in socialism and not communism? Well, there's a distinction that has to be made there. Communists seize power physically with forces, police, all kinds of physical abuse and so forth, but they don't destroy resistance. The resistance continues, and they have to have a KGB, they have to have a NKVD, they have to have national police force, not local police, which is something the Birch Society is very interested in. A socialist, on the other hand, who wants to take control of a country, he gets the people to vote themselves into the condition, and in the process destroys resistance. It's as clear as that. If the people vote themselves into socialism, then they got nobody to blame but themselves, and there's no need for the KGB or the NKVD except in small places and small portions. So it's very revealing that at the end of the 45-page booklet, the communists themselves said, join the Communist Party, help create the powerful, great vanguard which is leading the masses towards socialism. Are we being led towards socialism here in the United States? Absolutely. I mean, anybody who doesn't understand that isn't doing any good thinking, and it's time that people started doing some good thinking.
Yeah.
You've got people in the Congress of the United States. In fact, you've got a guy who almost won the Democratic nomination, Bernie Sanders, who's an out-and-out socialist, works with the Communist Party wherever he can, has great influence today on Joe Biden, has great influence with the revolutionary members of the U.S. Congress, Alexandria Cortez, whatever her name is.
Somebody calls, I think Alex calls her Alexander Occasional Cortex.
Well, we can laugh about it, but it isn't funny.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't.
One of the districts of the society that's neighboring to her, they just had a primary for the Democrats, and a 36-year veteran of the Democratic Party lost the primary to somebody who is farther to the left than AOC.
Wow.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And there's one of these people here in Massachusetts, there's one in Minnesota, there's one in Michigan, and they mean business. They mean to socialize America, and unfortunately, they're not being stopped. The people who should expose them aren't doing it. It's up to the John Birch Society. As usual, we take on the real enemy.
So I have a couple of questions. I want to go back just into JBS history just a little bit, just with a couple of questions. Were we the only organization that was exposing communism at the time? Or
Well,
were there others that were doing so? And if so, do you remember who any of them were?
there were a few organizations, some of them led by preachers. There was a man in New Jersey, can't think of his name, but he was active.
Did they get smeared
And
like we did?
he eventually became a member of the Birch Society.
Oh,
He said, why am I fooling around with this in my own organization?
that's
I got something better here. And there were small anti-communist groups here and there throughout the country, some in the West Coast, some in the Chicago area, some in St. Louis. And when these people began to realize that the John Birch Society had a nationwide organization, they were very happy to close the door of their organization and become Birch Society members.
wow.
So Robert Welsh, when he started out, was actually a collection agency. He was collecting people who had already some awareness of the communist problem,
Yeah.
and
So
he gave them a solution.
So I was actually smeared. We were actually smeared again today, which is, I guess, good news because, you know the old saying, right? No, bad news is still, good news for us. We got smeared again today in the Coeur d'Alene Press up north about the Freedom is the Cure rally, and they brought up something that everybody brings up. And I honestly, I haven't read enough to know or to remember where that comes from, but there was a saying that a lot of people use, and they say that we believe that there was a communist under every bush. Was that a quote that actually came from somewhere, or was that just a quote that was created by those that don't like us to be able to try to smear us?
Second alternative is it. Robert Welsh was careful. He never said that everybody was a communist. He said there were people who were following the lead of the communists. They were influenced by the communists. They took money from the communists. They did this from the communists and so forth. They weren't themselves communists. One of the chief individuals in that regard was Martin Luther King. He took money from the communists. He was trained at their training sessions. He lied about everything possible, and what's interesting about King is that in the year 2027, the FBI files that were put aside and clamped so that nobody could see anything about King were put in for 50 years. It was in 1977. All of the information that had been gathered was put in a sealed situation somewhere, not to be opened until the year 2027. Well, when they open up the files in 2027, they're going to find out that the John Birch Society was way ahead of
Right.
them.
If we're still golly, if we're still a country by then, I mean, the way things are going, it's just crazy.
Well,
So,
we're gonna be a country by then.
so
You're not in this to lose, and neither am I.
you're
We're
darn
gonna win
right.
this battle.
You're darn
So,
right. Well, I mean, I have, people are, it's funny. It's really nice, and it's a humbling position for me to be in a position of trust where people trust me, and they look to me for encouragement and some of those things. And so I never expected all of the good things that would happen that really kind of go unnoticed or unsaid, being a coordinator for the society. So can you help me understand, or help those that listening understand? We often hear the word socialism, communism, and of course you went into that earlier, but specifically more along the lines of globalism and communists. When you're going to define a communist, how do you define a communist? And when you're going to talk about a globalist, how do you define a globalist? Because aren't globalists communists?
no, a
Okay.
lot of globalists are professorial types who couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag if they didn't get a big salary from some university. Uh, the uh, the problem that we have can be changed. It's not as much communism today as it is the New World Order. That's one of the things that we have to be afraid of. The New World Order is being well promoted, and I had a interesting clipping I was going to show you, and what did I do with it? I don't know. It's somewhere on this messy desk I have. but it's an article that was published in the Wall Street Journal by Henry Kissinger. Now, Henry Kissinger couldn't have helped the communist cause or the socialist cause more than he always did. He's a very dangerous individual. He had the confidence of the newspapers. He had the confidence of government officials. There were very few people pointing to this man as an enemy of freedom, which he certainly was and has been all his life. Now, Henry Kissinger wrote an article, and he said in the article that the coronavirus was going to change everything. And you won't recognize your country after the coronavirus hits and so forth. And he said that at the beginning of the pandemic and its effect that it has had. So he knew something beyond what many people knew, and he was happy to say it. He's kind of a proud individual. He would like to be the first to have said something like that, and he certainly did.
What was this dated recently?
It was in. Let me turn around here and see if I find the article.
I may even have a copy of it somewhere.
Here we go. All right. I don't know whether you can read the headline. I'll read
Yeah,
it
I
to
could
you.
definitely see it.
The corona pandemic will forever alter the world order.
Gosh.
That's what Henry Kissinger said.
Oh my gosh.
I got another article today.
So when was that dated, John?
Excuse me, April 3,
Okay.
2020.
Okay.
Now, April 3, 2020, there was concern about the coronavirus,
Right.
but the lockdown hadn't occurred, and the requirement to wear a mask and the requirement to do a lot of other things hadn't yet taken hold. But here we now have a lot of restrictions on life. We've had how many millions of people have lost their jobs, some people lost their businesses, and so forth. And they're being forced to turn to government to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, the US dollar is becoming weaker because they're just printing them like I wish we would be able to print our magazines by the
Yeah,
millions.
I know, right?
But we do have a magazine.
Yes,
So
sir.
this article to me is very significant. He's talking about the relationship of societies with each other and to international peace and stability. The reality is the world will never be the same after the coronavirus. That's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
Tom, I'll send you a copy of this article.
I'd love that. I'd love that. So I'm curious. I guess something that keeps popping up into my mind all the time, and that is, history tends to repeat itself for those that, those that don't know it. So, before we actually get into the current events and as it happened in in the 60s during those other kinds of times, if you could briefly take us back as far as you can on what would be relevant to what America is facing today with totalitarian governments.
Well, you got to go back. You can go back all through history. There have been movements trying to seize control of mankind, trying to set themselves up as the ruler of the universe, and so on. What we're seeing today is not new, but here we are experiencing it. We're going through it, and it is a threat. There's no doubt about that. I like to turn to the French Revolution in the 1789. It lasted a good 10 years or more, and people took over France. They had influence in many other European countries. They even had influence in the United States, the French Revolution types. So much so that we ended up with a revolutionary symbol and a slogan on the back of the $1 bill. It's part of the Great Seal of the United States. Novus Ordo Seclorum can be translated from the Latin into New World Order. Right?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, so I guess a lot of people are in complete disarray about what's going on. They're fearful. They're confused. They don't really understand where this is coming from. So,
They need the John Birch
I
Society.
know they do. It's a great place for me to be right now.
Okay, well, how do you get these people to come to you and say, give me some information. I'm interested. I want to know what you people are all about. Right?
I go to them, you know?
Well, yeah, but the key to success of the Birch Society has always been what I call visibility.
Hmm.
Right?
Yes, sir.
One of the most successful coordinators we have is the guy that runs New Jersey and New York area, and he's got a tough district. I mean, he'd consider Idaho a piece of cake, I think,
Hmm.
but it's not. I know it's not. But anyhow, uh, he gets people involved in street fairs, county fairs, parades, all kinds of things. And every year when he gets this done, of course, he can't do it this year, but every year when he gets this done, he has people coming to him and saying, I've been watching you people for a couple of years now. You come to this fair or this event every year. And I did get a couple of pieces of your literature. I think it's time for me to join the Birch Society. And that's the way to do it. Uh, get the people out in the community and doing things. All right. And you can pick any topic that we are interested in. Support your local police. Get out of the United Nations. Um, and, and end the war in Afghanistan after 19 years. 19
Yeah.
years. Imagine the United States could have won that war in 6 months, I think, if they intended to win the war.
Yeah.
But they were under the control of the UN the whole time.
Right. Right. So, John, there was a video in was it 1966, Anarchy USA?
Yes.
What did the John Birch Society have in mind when they actually created that DVD? Do you think? Do you know?
Well, it was simply information. It was a history of the civil rights movement, the characters in it, the bad people and the good people. Among the people who were in that film were a couple of Black Americans who were very patriotic and made statements in the film that were really devastating to the communists that were behind the civil rights movement. One of them was a man named Leonard Patterson, who had joined the Communist Party in the 30s, and they thought so highly of Leonard Patterson, they took him to Russia, and they gave him 2 years worth of training. He came back to the United States, and he was in charge of the whole East Coast area for the communists. And one day he woke up and he said, this is all wrong. He said, I've been duped. And so he became an anti-communist, but he kind of disappeared. And we had to track him down. He was driving a cab in New York City. And so then he joined our Speakers Bureau, and he gave a wonderful statement. Anybody who has a copy of my history book of the John Birch Society can read that statement in there. And then there was another woman communist agent, infiltrator, I should say. Her name was Julia Brown. She lived in Cleveland. She's a Black American. And she went to a meeting one time that was supposed to be helping the Negroes gain equal rights and so forth. She was interested in that. And she found out because that she had actually joined the Communist Party without realizing it. So she was upset about that. She was duped. So she went to the FBI and she told them about everything she knew from having gone to a couple of those meetings, and that she wanted nothing more to do with them. And they said, Mrs. Brown, we're going to ask you to stay in the communist movement. We're going to ask you to report on what's going on and tell us all of what's happening to America in the Cleveland, Ohio area. And she did that for 9 long years. And she was finally asked to testify at the trial of some communists from that area, which exposed her for what she really was. And she was in jeopardy of her life. So she had to move out of Cleveland and so forth. She became a real star on the Birch Society Speakers Bureau. When Martin Luther King and his allies would go down to the southeastern part of our country. What happened is they would send somebody in and they would talk to some of the black leaders in the community, and they would say, okay, we're going to arrange for demonstrations, parades, and so forth. And we're going to do what we can to excite the people and have the government respond. And so that was going on, and the riots and the burnings and the shootings and so forth were all stimulated by the communists. They wanted that to happen. In 1965, in a magazine called the Saturday Review, King actually presented his strategy, and it was 4 steps. All right. First step, nonviolent demonstrators go into the streets to exercise their constitutional rights. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. But 2, listen to 2. Racists resist by unleashing violence against them. That's what they wanted. Number 3, Americans of conscience in the name of decency demand federal intervention and legislation. That's the goal of the rioting and so forth. And 4th, the administration under mass pressure initiates measures of immediate intervention and remedial legislation. So Julia Brown became armed with that kind of information. And she said, that's exactly what they were teaching me when I was a communist, infiltrator of the communists back in Cleveland. So she would, we would get phone calls from the South. Somebody would say, well, we heard about this Mrs. Julia Brown. Can you send her down here? They're planning to have a riot. They're planning to have demonstrations and violence and so forth. So Julia Brown would go to a city in the South, and they would have an audience of 300-500 people, half black, half white, and King would cancel his program. Right? That happened over and over again. So much so that King became worth more dead than alive, and he became dead. And he's been honored by them all these years.
Yep.
He actually called for violence. Now, they say he's the architect of nonviolence. Baloney. Total wrong. He's not. He never was, and he didn't intend to be. He wanted the violence. Now, that's not saying that there wasn't some illegal or immoral treatment of blacks in some portions of the South, but it was getting better. And Leonard Patterson, who made that statement I said in my history book, said that after living for 2 years in the Soviet Union, after being involved in the communist movement back in the States and so forth, I can tell you that I'm fortunate to be an American, to live in this country where I get better treatment and more opportunity for my life than I would in any other country. And Julia Brown knew that too. And of course, then there was Lola Bell Holmes. And then there was, I don't know, we had 6 or 8 Black Americans who were out on our Speakers Bureau doing a wonderful job. So that died, but it's coming back. Now it's back today. And the violence is being stimulated by Antifa, which is a communist movement. And we're seeing the same thing happen that happened in the 60s and into the 70s.
So I'm going to start with the solution first. Well, sort of. So I've always wondered myself, and as I can, I was thinking about or seeing pictures and stuff of, and read about the riots in the 60s and that kind of a thing. And one could say that history is repeating itself. But at one point, those riots ended. What do you attribute the end of all? I mean, what do you attribute the end of all of that to?
The John Birch Society.
Why did I know you were going to say that?
I'm not patting myself on the back and patting the Birch Society on its back. I'm just saying the truth. It became useless for them to start a riot so that they would get federal legislation that would bring us more into socialism, which is what they really wanted. Now, there were a lot of, the civil rights movement was loaded with communists. And King took money from them and worked with them and went to their training sessions and and so forth. Um, we produced, you mentioned the film Anarchy USA. It's very well done in that film. And it needs to be shown again today. If it was shown again today, people would say, oh, okay, here we go again. And if we stopped it back then, we can stop it again.
Well, we're doing our best to distribute that through email and sharing with others the best way
Well,
we
you can
can to
go,
share those
you know,
links as well.
you can go to YouTube and find
Hmm.
it, I believe.
Yep, done
Right?
that. Yep,
It's available.
yep. So,
It was,
John, if you had to list or give us any resources to learn a little bit more about the alternative perspective of King, could you point us in a direction for any of those in particular? Are they any in print anymore?
I don't know that they're in print anymore, but I can send you some material and you can use it locally and expose a fraud. Now, King was not only a pro-communist and an enemy of the United States, he attacked our military. He said our military was deliberately killing civilians in Vietnam and so forth. And it caused J. Edgar Hoover to call him the most notorious liar in our country. You know, you would think that that would be enough to do away with his image and so forth. It wasn't.
Hmm.
Martin Luther King was a plagiarist. He was a womanizer. Uh, what else can you say about somebody that's disreputable?
But
Uh,
wasn't he a Christian pastor? I mean, that's what we're all hearing, right? Isn't that what today's mantra is?
that's what you're all hearing is absolutely correct. I had an interesting thing happen. Uh, the headquarters of the Birch Society back in that period was Belmont, Massachusetts, which is very close to Boston. And Boston University School of Divinity, somebody called the Birch Society, wanted to know if we could bring our film Anarchy USA down there and show it to the students. They expected to be able to just, poo-poo it and laugh at it and so forth, right? Well, I got the job of taking the film down to Boston University, which is where Martin Luther King earned his doctorate degree. His with a lot of plagiarism, by the way.
Hmm.
That's how he got his degree. But anyhow, so I went down there. It's a 60-minute film. I went down and I set up. They had a projector for me, and I set it up, and we ran through the film. And after it was over, I said to the guy who had invited me, uh, "I'll be happy to stick around if anybody has any questions and try to answer them." He said, "No," he said, "you'll have to leave right away, Mr. McManus. We have other things we want to get to and everything else." And the real message was, get the heck out of here and take your film with you. They, they couldn't dispute the film. They couldn't do it. It was well done.
Yeah.
We owe that to a man named Ed Griffin, who was he wrote it, he collected the information, he got the film produced, and he's a longtime member and friend of the John Birch Society.
Yeah, yeah. I guess he's got a Red Pill Expo or something every year now. I've seen him a couple of times on social media. So I guess it's fair to say with all of this, and forgive me for sounding elementary, but so race really isn't the problem, right? It's not really black people that are oppressed, is it?
Well, I'm sure there are some black people who are oppressed, but I'm of Irish heritage. And that was 100 years ago here in the Boston area. There were signs up, we're hiring, Irish need not apply. The Irish couldn't get a job. Well, they finally got jobs in New York City and they built the subway system and so forth. But the Irish have assimilated and so forth. Uh, I think the black people, their worst enemy are some black loudmouths.
Hmm.
Jesse Jackson types, the Al
Sharptons. Hmm.
Sharptons. They're the worst enemies of the black people. There are some wonderful black Americans who have spoken out. Dr. Thomas Sowell out at
Yeah.
Stanford University has spoken out. There's a woman there now who's from, I think she's from Ethiopia originally, and she was a professor, I think, at Brandeis University in the Boston area, and then she went out to California. And now she's with I think she's tied up with Tom Sowell, and she says very, very plainly, there's nowhere on earth I would rather live than in the United States of America. It's the best place for people to earn a living and to enjoy what could be called civil rights and so on. So uh, that continues to be. Is it perfect? No, no, it's not perfect. Can it be made better? Yes. Now, I've gone on radio shows all across the country and television programs when I'm on a speaking tour and so forth. I can't count the number of these programs. And I don't know how many times they've asked me, how do you answer being charged with anti-Semitism and racism? I said, well, it's not true. Uh, well, add to that, Mr. McManus. I said, well, we have black members and we have Jewish members. And then the next question is, how many? I said, I don't know. We don't ask people that on an application for membership. I said, but Jewish members will come up to me and say, I'm Jewish and I'm proud to be a member of the Birch Society. If you need somebody to put down the anti-Semitic charge, let me know, and I'll be glad to help you out. We've had a member of the council on the John Birch Society's National Council, a Jewish member, right from the beginning. A man named Alfred Kohlberg was one of the first members, a member of the first council when it was formed. Black members, they say to me, how many black members do you have? I said, well, look, I can tell when I'm standing and talking to a black member of the Birch Society. It's very easy for me to make that conclusion. But I said, I don't know how many there are. I was in Connecticut recently, and a black fella, I think he's a truck driver, he drove up from New Haven to where we were, about an hour's drive. He'd heard that the meeting was going to be coming. He sat through a meeting. I conducted the meeting. I gave a speech, I think, on the United Nations. And he joined the Birch Society that night. And he's told me since, and he's told the people that he's gotten friendly with there, how hard it is for him to be able to get his people that he knows in the black community to start doing some good thinking and to listen to the John Birch Society, because they've been sold a bill of goods and so forth. I was sold a bill of goods about the society myself. I believed William Buckley when he started condemning the Birch Society. I eventually wrote a book about the great pretender, William Buckley.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and hopefully if I get you again, that's one thing I'd really like to work. I'd really like to do. There's not really enough talk about the neoconservatives and the history of where they came from, and I can't share that video enough. So I guess with all of the confusion that's going on, Idaho is really fighting for its life with the Rocky Mountain heist taking firm hold and shaking the Idaho's conservatism to its core. There's also been this issue with libertarians and constitutionalists, and they've really had a problem with the police, right? It's either if you support police, somehow you support a totalitarian police state, and that Tom's gone to the dark side, and so they would rather point the finger at law enforcement, saying that they're the real enemy because nobody likes an abusive cop. And so what do you say to that?
I say, if you don't have a police force, you're going to have anarchy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you want a local over the police force. You don't want a national police force. That's the KGB. That's the NKVD. What you want is the local police force who have a responsibility to protect the lives of the people in that community where they live. And if there are 4,300 or 4,000 or I don't know how many local police forces in the United States, I say, good, keep it that way. There are people who say, well, we ought to nationalize all the police. Oh, no, please don't. Please don't. And anybody who's listening, please get involved in the fight to retain local police.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, before we go, I only get time for a commercial here.
Sure.
This is my book, The History of the John Birch Society. I can remember several years ago at a meeting of the leaders of the Birch Society, Art Thompson conducted the meeting. And at one point he just said, you know, we need a history of the John Birch Society. And he pointed to me and he said, Jack, we need you to write it. And I went, ooh. So it took me a couple of years, but I kind of finally came out with a 400 and some odd page book. Now this book was selling for $25 plus $5 postage and handling. I'm lowering the price now. Anybody who wants a copy, send me a check or cash, $20. That will cover the cost of the book and the postage and handling, and I'll even autograph the book. Send it to John McManus, P.O. Box 3076 in Wakefield, Massachusetts, 01880. P.O. Box 3076, Wakefield, Massachusetts, 01880.
Okay.
$20. And I'm kind of proud of the book. I put a lot of time and effort into it. But, you know, you go over some of the things we've talked about here in that book. And you'll see instances of the John Birch Society winning a battle. You know, it's not supposed to be that the Birch Society has ever won anything. We've won plenty of battles, plenty at the local level, some at the regional level, and one or two or three or four at the national level. And we continue to do it. What we need in the Birch Society, we need more people spreading the word. Education is our strategy. Truth is the weapon, and it will explode the conspiracy and get us back on the track.
So I have a couple of questions before we go. So if you can help some of those people that are liberty people and they're struggling with the issues of police abuse, what kind of solutions would you propose to them?
Well, first of all, you got to realize that abuses by policemen are minuscule compared to the numbers of policemen throughout the country. Stop and think for a minute. If you lived in a communist-controlled country and you were walking down the street and you saw a policeman at the end of the street, you'd turn around and go home. You would not proceed. You didn't want to have anything to do with that guy. You knew he was a creature of the federal government in the communist country. Here in America, you walk down the street and you see a policeman, you probably go up and say, how's your day? How's everything going? You might even know him. Your children might go to the same school his children go to, right? And that's what you want. Mm-hmm. Right? So most of the policemen in the United States are wonderful people. They've taken on a somewhat dangerous job. Not too dangerous here in Wakefield, Massachusetts, but we did have somebody go berserk a few years ago and start shooting. He killed up 4 or 5 people in a place where he used to work, and things like that can happen. So police should be locally controlled. And you got to realize that the bad deeds of a very, very minuscule few, should not turn your attitude against all police. That would be very dangerous.
So as you go through and as long as you've been involved in the society and understanding current events, especially from the Birch perspective, it's got to have been kind of tough at times, right? I mean, a heart can only take so much.
Well, it's tough until you get together and start working with other people.
Yes, sir. Yes, it is.
When I joined the Birch Society, I guess before 6 months was over, I had a chapter in my community. We started bringing in speakers. We even had Julia Brown come to speak in my community. Julia and I became quite friendly, by the way. She passed away several years ago. She was just an absolutely wonderful human being. I loved her. So we had a chapter going and so forth, and then people started moving away, and we lost a couple of older members through age and so on. But I still run a chapter here in the greater Boston area,
Hmm.
and I've got people coming to meetings. We haven't had a meeting in a long time because of the Corona shutdowns. The restaurant where we would have the meetings all the time had to close, and now we're hoping that we can get that going again soon again.
Yeah. So you believe it's possible then for us to be able to reach out to communists or globalists and to be able to convert them to see the error of their ways? Yes.
Well, you will have success with some of those people, but what you really want is the ordinary American who's disturbed. He knows there's something wrong.
Hmm.
All right. So say, hey, uh, why is it that the United States has been involved in a war in Afghanistan for 19 years and hasn't won the war? Why is it that we haven't won a war since 1945? World War II ended. We won that war, but we also joined the United Nations at that point, and we haven't won a war since.
Yeah.
Is there a connection? Maybe we could do a program some other time on this, just the subject of the United Nations.
Yeah. I think we're doing that Thursday, actually, right?
Okay by me.
I think we're doing it Thursday night, same place, same channel, 7 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh yeah, here's my list of meetings that I've got. I've got meetings set up with coordinators here and there and everywhere.
That's fantastic.
I
It's
just got a call from Caleb Collier.
from up north. Yeah.
Yeah, he's does he cover part of the northern Idaho?
Yes, he does.
So
Yeah, he's igniting the North Idaho, and he's on fire. Yeah, I mean,
he
he's
said
got.
he wants to see seed from Seattle.
Yeah, yeah, he yeah, he does. Yeah, he's
I
a.
can remember, I can remember in 1964, I think it was Barry Goldwater running for president. He said we ought to saw off New England and let it float out to the sea.
Yes, sir.
The penetration of our country was mostly accomplished through Eastern universities and the taking control of major newspapers, and it happened here first, and it's now spread all across the country. But it happened here first and the longest. So we've got Harvard and we've got Yale and we've got other Ivy League schools. And I went to Holy Cross College in Worcester, Massachusetts, which used to be Catholic. I don't consider it a Catholic college anymore. I mean, some of the things they've done up there are just an abomination. I've let them know what I think, and they just shrug their shoulders and say, well, okay, don't come to see us anymore.
Oh my goodness, my goodness.
Don't send us any donations. I said, well, you don't have to tell me that. I've already figured that out.
Right. Well, since it's getting late over there, I got one more question for you, and then I'll let you go. So, with all that you've seen and all that you know about what's coming, what advice do you have to the listeners before we depart tonight?
The advice I have to anybody is get informed and then share what you know. All right?
Mhm.
Don't be bashful about it. One of the best techniques to use is ask a question. Right? Ask somebody who's upset about what's going on in Portland, Oregon right now, or some other cities. Ask them if they realize that this has all happened before, and it can lead to a destruction of our country.
Mhm.
And they say, okay, tell me more. That's what you want to hear. Tell me more. All
Yes,
right?
sir.
And if all members would do that, a lot of members are content to just be well informed.
Mhm.
That's not good enough.
Mm-mm.
You got to spread what you know. You got to get other people to be well informed.
Yeah.
And
What's
that's
what's the quote? They don't care what you know; they care what you do about it.
I guess so.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I like.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Okay, one more
One more
commercial.
plug, sure.
$20. Send it to John McManus, P.O. Box 3076 in Wakefield, Massachusetts 01880. I'll be glad to send you a copy. I got less than 20 left, and they're not doing any good sitting here, so I can't give them away, but we reduced the price about $10.
We'll try to help you move those, John. Thank you so much
Thank
for attending. I will see you if you have me on your calendar there. I will see you here Thursday night.
Thursday night.
And we're gonna.
Same time,
You can.
same time, same station.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and we're gonna. You can tell us all you know about the United Nations. All right.
Only 1 hour? I only got 1 hour?
Oh no, you can go as long as you want. I don't care how long you go. You just might lose some. You might lose listeners, but they can. If it's recorded, they can come back and watch it in increments. It's okay.
You got to remember that this is Eastern time I'm on. You know.
I know. I had a hard time trying to get you on at 7, which is 9 o'clock your time. So I apologize for that, but I thank you for trying to hit us at a good time. So I look forward to seeing you Thursday.
Thanks, Tom.
All right.
It's been a
Thanks.
pleasure.
Thanks,
Been a
John.
pleasure.
Good
Right.
night.